I would like to thank .tech Domains for sponsoring this video. Because why not? It is short, relevant, and pretty much inclined to what we do as developers. It has become the de facto online address for programmers working on awesome projects, as well as industry leaders launching tech initiatives, industry blogs, startups, etc. If you want to get grab of your .tech domain today, go to go.tech/codedamn to get 90% off on your 1 and 5 year .tech domains for a limited time. Remember, this is only valid for CodeDamn subscribers, so check the link in the description to grab your awesome discount. Remember, if you're in tech, you simply use a .tech. So what's going on, everybody? My name is Mehul and welcome back to another video in which we are going to discuss how to work with Chrome DevTools, that is your Chrome developer tools. Now this is a beginner friendly video, beginner to intermediate, so you can stick along if you want to know how to actually make use of Chrome DevTools, which is very useful every time if you are a web developer. Doesn't matter if you're on front end or on back end. It helps you to debug a lot of stuff. So let's get into it. Alright, so first things first, you can obviously go ahead and debug your program just by hit and trial, by making some changes in your code and then seeing if the browser shows them properly, or maybe like making some changes on the back end and seeing them if they work properly on the front end. But that is very much time consuming. Plus, you're gonna waste a lot of energy doing that. So what you have to do basically is in your Chrome browser, just go ahead and right click anywhere on the page and click on this inspect. Now what it's going to do is it's going to open this kind of panel. Now for you, this should probably be white. You can make this dark. I guess you can go it somewhere in the settings and change this theme from light to dark. I prefer dark, so I'm just gonna keep it like that, right? Once you do that, what you should see is a bunch of tabs here, right? So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. And you can obviously rearrange these tabs by just dragging them here and there and make yourself comfortable. Whatever you use the most, keep them on the left. That's at least what I prefer, right? All right, starting off with the elements tag, what this shows you actually the complete DOM structure of your website. So your website, you have coded in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript because essentially that's what you could do at the moment. That's how you code front end, right? It boils down to just HTML code, just CSS code, and JavaScript code. So this part consists of all the HTML you see, right? And this is not the HTML you write, but rather the DOM structure. That is your document object model structure, which represents the changes done by JavaScript as well. So because if you go ahead and just view page source of this particular page, you're gonna see this is actually the HTML which the server sends, right? Then the browser downloads all these assets and all these, JavaScript and CSS files, runs them, and then JavaScript in turn modifies this DOM structure, and this is what you see as the final DOM structure right now at the moment, right? So you see, you can just open these little tags right here, and they're gonna reveal their children below them. You can make use of this. You can click on this icon and go ahead on your page and click on any one of the things you want to get into the DOM tree, and it will straight away take you to that particular item in your nested tree, right? So pretty useful if you just want to get to this Hello Mehul Mohan. Just click on this and click here, and you are on this H1 containing Hello Mehul Mohan, right? Alternatively, what you could do is just right click on that particular element and click on inspect. It still takes you to that particular element, right? So if you want to go to the settings, right click on it, click on inspect, and you are directly taken to settings, right? All right, so that's the part of elements. So you're gonna see all this HTML data structure in front of you. The next comes is this right hand side. So you see, whatever you select, this right hand side keeps on changing, right? So what you see basically on the right is the styles applied to that particular element. So you see you have a div ID of root here, and on the right you see this hash root and CSS associated with it. Now you see these checkboxes, you can actually toggle the properties right here. You can change the property values to see real-time changes, right? You can do pretty much all the stuff. You can change any property, like whatever you like. You can add properties like display none to hide them. You can check uncheck properties, just like I was talking about. You can see this shows you in the order of your styles, right? So you see this hash root. This style is defined in this bundled underscore home.css file. If you click on this, it's going to take you to this sources tab, which we're going to come to later on, right? But what we see is down as we go, we have other selectors which are applied. So you see a star selector is applied to every tag. So that is what it is. Then we have something known as user agent style sheets, which are the style sheets the browser actually provides itself, right? So by default, if you don't do anything to div, browser says, hey, this should be a div, should be a block, right? Block element. Then it shows some styles which it inherits from its parents, right? For example, the body inherits, the div inherits font family and font weight from its parent. And then, lower down the line, it shows you everything. Then finally, it shows you this bounding box, which would be a little bit more clear if we have some sort of inner element somewhere right here, right? So if we see this dashboard element, if we go ahead and see this bounding box, you're going to see that we get this as the dimension of this thing, right? You could also see the dimension of this thing right here in that 1920 cross something, which shows you total width. But you see right here, this is the actual content width. This is the padding applied. You can see, if I can just go ahead and get this background fixed. Let me just reload this page once so that we have a white background that is much easier to see, right? So if we go ahead and on this dashboard, we see that this content is in blue area. The padding consists of this green area now. This is the border. It does not have any border, so you see it shows you dashes here that the border is not present, and margin is also not present, right? So this is your bounding box for this particular element, which you can see. You probably won't need to use this a lot, but you should know that just in case, right? Apart from this, you also have like computed tab, where it shows you all the computed properties it has done for this particular element. Again, you could check these properties out, but you won't need to check them very often, right? You also have event listeners for this particular element. You can go ahead and check them out, but again, you won't need to do that a lot right here. So for the elements tab, what we have importantly is just the HTML structure right here and the CSS properties, which are present right here. Moving on to the console tab, you're going to see that you just get a pretty simple console right here, which you can clear, right? So you can see these settings, all these settings. I'm just going to remove this preserve log so that we can clear this console. All right, so whatever you execute here would be treated as your JavaScript, which runs on this particular page. So for example, if you want to run your custom JavaScript code snippets somewhere, this is the place you're gonna write them, right? Apart from this, console is the place pretty much your whole website or your whole web application would put the debug information. So this is the place to look for any errors or any sort of thing you think that is kind of like messing around on your website. Console is the first place you have to check whether, let's say, animation script is not working, or let's say some sort of image is not loading on your website, or let's say some sort of network request is failing. Console is the place where the browser would send all that particular information, right? So just like you saw that when I reloaded this page, we had a couple of errors here. First of all, this one, that this particular image is not found, right? So where would we see that? We could technically see that in networks tab as well, but the first place you should go ahead and see is the console. So console is your gold mine for seeing what sort of errors are there on a particular page, right? All right, so apart from executing scripts here and seeing errors on the page, we have a hell lot of things here. In the settings, you could pretty much like preserve the log if you want to like not allow console to clean itself when you reload the page or navigate away from the page. You can do that, right? You could change the context of this particular console. So what happens is by default your console is running for this particular web page, right? But for example, let's say if I had an iframe somewhere here, so how do I jump into that? So I could just click here, just go to that particular iframe and select that, right? So for instance, let's just go to, let's say this JavaScript basics and this one. So what we're going to see is we have an iframe right here. So now if I click here, I'm going to see something like this, which is this about blank. And you can see that that iframe gets highlighted. So when I click on this, you're going to see that now I am particularly inside this console, right? And I can just verify that for you by typing jQuery, I guess, or like $. Yeah. So $.jQuery, not sure. So anyway, we are operating inside this iframe, right? You can see that when I do an alert here, we get an embedded page on this page says, right? So that's what it is. So that's how you can change context of your console. You should probably be working on the top one only, but just in case you want to work with iframe, any iframe, you can work with that. You can work with web workers as well, but that's pretty much an advanced usage. You won't need that. All right, coming to next tab, that is our sources tab. What this tab does is that it pretty much consists of all the assets your browser fetches, right? Pretty much every asset. So you see that on the left, we have the assets as the browser fetches them. For example, the CSS file. The CSS file, you can see all these tabs opening. And what you could do to like make them at least readable is click on this format icon, right? So once you do that, you see that you get a formatted version of that particular thing. And now you can look around and see how this file looks like. Pretty useful in case of JavaScript files, right? So you see that this is a builded webpack.json file. So that's why it does not really make any sense. But when you're debugging it, when you're on localhost, when you're developing the application, it kind of makes sense, a lot of sense, right? So yeah, that's that. Now on the right, you're gonna see this column called threads. Technically, this is not threads, it's just web workers with your main thread. So in JavaScript, we do not have threading, but kind of like a threading based environment using web workers, right? Which you can think of as the JavaScript running in the background. So this text editor Monaco is using 2 web workers. You can see right now at the moment. So you can switch between those threads, but usually you will be just working with the main thread, right? We have some watch column here. You can add some variables here to watch to see when their value changes. We have a call stack. So if I just go ahead and pause the JavaScript execution somewhere, you're gonna see that when I clicked on this pause button, my Grammarly extension in the browser was kind of like executing some sort of JavaScript statement. And at that particular moment, I just paused it, right? So you see that debugger is paused. And now in the call stack section, we see how this particular, where this particular call arrived from at the moment where JavaScript code execution is happening right now. So this is useful, for example, if you have placed a debugger breakpoint in your JavaScript code and you want to check how that particular, how you reach to that particular point, right? So you can see right here, in our case, we are at this t.flush method, which was called by this t.request async, whatever this is, right? Which is further called by all these methods, which are not interesting for us because we have not developed this, right? This is used for like, if this is blue, then it means that your all breakpoints are deactivated, right? And since we do not really have placed any debuggers right here, so this doesn't really matter for us. This means that you should pause your JavaScript execution whenever there's an exception occurring, right? So pretty useful again when you're developing applications. And that's that for the call stack part. The breakpoints part again consists of the parts of the code where you have specifically written this debugger keyword, right? So for example, if you have like a function something important, and you know something is not right here. So what you do is you just after some point you write a debugger here and then write rest of the code. So if your console window is opened and you run this particular code, what would happen is inside breakpoints that debugger would be listed and your code execution would be paused, just like I showed you when we click on this pause button, right? So that's the point of breakpoints. You can see all those breakpoints there. Again, this is because this is a production build of CodeTam. You don't see any breakpoints, but in the development build, there are tons of those. Then we have these XHR with fetch breakpoints, DOM breakpoints, global listeners, which are attached. This listener is basically attached to this particular iframe right here, right? Which is listening for messages from the parent. And then we also have event listener. For example, let's say if you want to listen to every mouse click. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. Now, when I click on this, you're going to see we get a breakpoint right here, which is because of we are listening to every mouse click. So it, paused that particular execution there, right? For us to take a look first. All right, with that being done, let's just continue. So we're going to move on. I'm just going to close this. We're going to move on to networks tab. Okay, moving on to the networks tab. It is very, very interesting again, because a lot of your debugging time on the networks would be spent here. So right here, you could see you have a bunch of tools. You can disable caching of your assets. You can see right here in the size, I see all these things, memory cache, memory cache, memory cache. So if you're developing and if you see that browser is kind of like caching your changes, you can enable this and boom, your caching is gone. You can also kind of like preserve this network request log. You can group these network requests. For example, if I just want to see the JavaScript ones or maybe just the CSS ones, so I'm going to get these. So right, I can go ahead and right here, if I click on any particular request, I can format it right here, go to this headers. I'm going to get complete information, where it is, what is the IP address of that particular domain from which it is requesting that, the status code, the request method it did. Obviously, get would be the ones generated for these script accesses, right? The response headers, everything. The server sends back the request headers, what your browser sends to the server, and the response itself, right? Any cookies it kind of like set on your browser, and obviously the timing of that request, right? Which kind of would enable you to debug the bottleneck if your network requests are slow. You can obviously go ahead and search for any particular network request as well. For example, let's just say panel. I'm searching for panel. So here's one request, right? You can see its response is the HTML we got, its timing and all that stuff, right? Pretty useful. If you switch to like images, you're gonna see this red, which just shows me a status that it's 404, it failed. So yeah, I know now that the path where it failed, right? So I'm gonna just go ahead and fix that. All right, so that's pretty much it for the network request tab, right? The other four, the rest of them, like performance, memory, application, security. Application is kind of like monitoring your local storage and session storage, and basically kind of your storages, right? Your cookies as well, which pretty much you could do with console as well. Not really with console, because you won't be able to view your HTTP only cookies, but you can see your HTTP only cookies here. So that kind of like makes it a little bit superior. But you can pretty much see your storage mechanisms all right here. So if I click on here, you're gonna see all the local storage which this website is using right now, right? You can go ahead and see that. All right. About for the memory part, for the performance part, this is kind of like a little advanced usage. You're gonna see if you're working on like some really performance intensive thing and you see that there's some sort of memory leaks or performance is not up to mark, then you're gonna make use of memory to like take the screenshots of your heap, it's not really screenshot, the snapshot, and see where the location where the memory usage spikes, and accordingly modify your code. For the performance part, it's basically like how your website loading time performs, and it gives you some suggestions to improve upon that. Security kind of like just list your certificate details for the HTTPS certificate you're using. For example, you can just get that information from here too, I guess. Yeah, right here with this particular certificate, you have all these details pretty much with you, right? And I guess that's pretty much what it shows you here too, right? Yeah, so that's pretty much what the security tab does. And yeah, other than that, you can have your custom tabs as well, which your Chrome extensions could add. So I'm obviously not going to get into that because that is some custom functionality, but these are pretty much the default tabs in your Chrome DevTools you should know how to use and work with, right? So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you then in the next one.